All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So, hi, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar, The Quest for Title 38 by VA Psychologists, presented by Dr. Mary Beth Shea. So, today's webinar is part of the Advocacy webinar series, which is a collaboration between Division 18's VA section and the Association of VA Psychologist Leaders. My name is Tiffany Fennell, and I chair the VA section of Division 18, and I'm also a psychologist at the VA Puget Sound Healthcare System. Before we begin, I'd like to take a brief moment to mention that Division 18, Psychologists in Public Service, has been the home division for VA psychologists and other public service psychologists in APA since 1946. And the Association of VA Psychologist Leaders, or AVAPAL, is a professional organization outside of APA for psychologists in the VA. These two organizations have a long and rich legacy of advocating for VA psychologists and the veterans we serve. For more information about these programs, please check out the web links pod for links to these organizations' websites. And one last note before I introduce Dr. Shea, all questions can be entered into the chat box. We've also enabled participants to use their mics to ask questions, and there will be time reserved towards the end of the presentation today for any questions that weren't answered earlier on. And if you run into any technical difficulties, just alert me in the chat box and I'll attend to you as quickly as I can. So now for introductions. Dr. Mary Beth Shea is the training director at the Orlando VA Medical Center. She's been at the VA since internship and has served in multiple leadership roles, including military sexual trauma coordinator, evidence-based psychotherapy coordinator, local recovery coordinator, vital program manager, and IRB chair. Dr. Shea is the immediate past president of the Association of VA Psychologist Leaders and recognized nationally as a strong advocate for veterans, VA healthcare, and VA psychologists. So I'm really pleased to present Dr. Shea. And Dr. Shea, your mic may be muted, or at least I'm not
Okay, we'll
hearing
try
it.
again.
Okay.
Good. So thank you everybody for coming on a Friday afternoon. I know it's tough to get time on a Friday afternoon to come and listen to a webinar, but I'm really glad that you're all here, and I hope that we can have a productive discussion. I have asked for the mics to be unmuted, so as long as that works, I'm happy to entertain questions throughout the presentation. So you can use the chat box, or you can just unmute your mic. There's a little icon up at the top of your screen should be that you can unmute and ask a question. So I want to remind everybody that this is a team effort. So I'm doing the presentation, but I have certainly not done all of the work on this. Huge thanks to our current AVAPL Executive Committee, and that's Tracy Smith, Sam Wan, John McQuaid, and Genevieve Davis, as well as the former Executive Committee members that have worked on this. Most recently, Mary Levinson and Jody Rubenstein. So this is an effort that's gone back many, many years, and I'm just carrying it at the moment. So again, thank you all for coming, and thanks to those who have helped up until now. So what we're going to talk about today is what is Title 38? Why do we want to do Title 38, and how would that happen if we are able to accomplish it? So Title 38 at its base is a hiring authority. So there's three ways that VA can hire people. There's the traditional civil service employees, which are hired under Title 5. There's Title 38, which is really the professional staff, so physicians, dentists, other sorts of medical and professional staff. And then there's what's called the hybrid Title 38. And what happens in the hybrid Title 38 is these are people who are considered to be sort of auxiliary or paraprofessionals or other than medical professionals. So what happens in Title 38 hiring can be accomplished simply by submitting a CV and a license directly to the selecting official. So if you've worked with your chief of mental health or your chief of psychiatry, they can hire physicians just by getting a CV and say, yep, we want this person, let's bring them in. Whereas in Title V, any of you who've done any hiring of psychologists or others, you have to post through USA Job, offer the veteran's preference. OPM establishes the basic qualifications. We use KSAs, and then a list of candidates is sorted initially by HR and passed on to the hiring official as a cert. Now, in the hybrid, there are some places that do it according to Title 38 and some that do it according to Title 5. So recently, psychologists, they told us that we did not have to use all the Title 5 procedures to hire because we were a hard-to-hire profession. But again, it could go back at any time, and some places are still continuing to use certs, and I think that the current thinking is that if you use USA Jobs, then you have to do the whole thing. And so that sort of limits how we're able to advertise and get people interested in our positions. The interesting thing, though, on this slide is among the group of hybrid Title 38, psychologists and a couple of pharmacists are the only doctoral level licensed independent professionals. And that's really what jumped out to me and made me question sort of what are we doing in this hybrid group. So I asked, went back and found information about it. So just a little history lesson, and I won't get too bogged down in this, but there was a public law established back when that developed what the VA is. And in that public law, they said that they wanted to be able to hire doctors, dentists, and nurses without regard to the old civil service laws. They just wanted to be able to hire people in quickly and easily. And so in that early public law, they allowed for this Title 38 to hire doctors, nurses, and dentists on board. So over time, there have been additional laws that expanded that Title 38 to include all these other groups. So dental auxiliaries, podiatrists, optometrists, even facility directors are under Title 38. And interestingly, our trainees are licensed physical therapists, chiropractors, pharmacists, OTs. All of these have had legislative action to add them to Title 38. So why not psychology? There actually was a law that was developed back in 1983 to move psychologists to Title 38. I was really surprised to hear this when I first heard it. But what happened was, what they said was that they would have psychologists who had diplomate status in ABEP would be Title 38, and all other psychologists would remain in Title 5. So the expectation was that the leadership, sort of the service chiefs, the psychology chiefs, would be Title 38, and those of us who were Indians would be remain in Title 5. So the then Secretary Walters said, no, I can't have that. I can't have two different groups of psychologists working here. It'll cause dissension in the ranks. It'll cause all kinds of confusion. We're just going to leave them where they are. So that was abandoned. So then along came this hybrid that I've mentioned, and it converted 21 of the Title V positions to Title 38. And what happens in the hybrid is that there are certain rules for hiring and promotion that are consistent with Title 38, but we're Title V for everything else. So for leave, for attendance, for union representation, for pay scales, all of that, we're treated as Title V. But there are certain things that they've kind of eased the hiring authorities on that make us a hybrid Title 38. So psychologists supported the move to this hybrid at the time because the biggest complaint against Title 38 at that time was that Title 38 employees work 24/7 for the VA. And so people were not allowed to have private practices because technically they were on duty all the time for VA. And so they said, no, we've all got private practices. We don't want that. We would rather stay Title V and be able to keep doing our private practices. So importantly, there have been some amendments made since 2003 that now allow for outside employment during off-tour hours for Title 38 employees. So Title 38 employees have to work a normal work shift. The needs of the VA still have to come first, but they are allowed to what doctors call moonlight and we call private practice. So the question is, should we just leave well enough alone? I don't know. It typically takes 4 to 6 months to onboard a new psychologist. The mental health hiring initiative that's currently underway had a target of 1,000 new mental health by the end of 2018. We didn't quite make it by 2018, but we have now reached that goal. We did hire 1,045 new mental health providers. However, as you can see on this slide, only 265 of those were psychologists. The other part that was interesting to me about this slide was that we still have a 10.5% vacancy rate for psychologists. And while we hired 1,125 psychologists during this hiring initiative since 2017, our net increase was only 265. So I'll repeat that. We had to hire 1,125 people to have a net gain of 265 psychologists. So that means that we lost 860 psychologists in that same time span. That at least makes me want to say, why? So we've got significant problems with recruitment and retention. If we look at Psychologist Salary in VA, as you all know, salary is determined simply by your years since licensure. You come in as a GS 11 or 12 or 13 step 1, and you climb that little ladder depending on how long you stay here. We cannot offer additional incentives to the best and brightest. You may get a little bonus, you may get an appreciation award, but there's no way for your boss to increase your salary to reflect that you're working harder or performing better. So academia and private practice offer benefits that we can't even begin to approach. The next statement that I have is purely anecdotal. It's based on my own experience and observations, but at least where I work, it appears that we're able to recruit new psychologists straight out of internship pretty easily because our pay at that level is very competitive. But the problem is that as we get further into our careers and our colleagues, non-VA colleagues, get further into their careers, their salaries surpass ours and we can't keep up anymore. So it's hard for us to hire in people with more experience or more expertise. So at least what it looks like to me is that we're getting a younger and younger workforce, which is not all bad, but there is something that comes with experience. So right now, psychologists in hybrid Title 38 sort of top out after about 20 years as a 1310, and there we sit, kind of stuck there forever. There has been some improvement with the new qual standards for GS 14 and 15, but there's still no way for full-time practicing clinicians to advance beyond a 1310. So you can go on and you can become a program manager or a service chief or other things, but if what you want to do is be a clinical psychologist, you're going to be stuck at that 1310. So why now? Why do we care about this now as opposed to earlier at some other time? So the huge focus on veterans' mental health care is really what's driving this right now. As you know, that there's an increasing need, not only because of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, but as our Vietnam combat and Vietnam era vets are aging, they are coming in at higher numbers than ever before to the VA. So there's this huge influx of need for mental health in VA that we haven't seen before. Add on top of that the new executive order for transitioning service members, and we're looking at the possibility of 32,000 new veterans seeking mental health treatment the year following discharge. Every year. as long as we have all of these transitioning service members. So that's kind of why we're looking at this as being important right now. So I'm going to switch on my video here for just a minute. And I apologize for the moving around of it. But how does Title 38 happen? It does literally take an act of Congress. So what happens when Congress wants to make something happen is they introduce a bill, and then it goes for committee action. And then from the committee, it may or may not get moved up to the floor. There are debates that happen at that point. There are amendments that may happen. If it gets past that, then the House and the Senate have to work jointly to approve a negotiated revision. And it just keeps coming back and back. So let me just give you a quick little history lesson on what happens to bills.
Whew, you sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. But I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will, but today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill.
So pardon my attempt at throwing humor in on a Friday afternoon. So ADAPLs ask repeatedly when we go to the Hill to talk with the congressional staffers is that they move psychologists to Title 38 away from the hybrid Title 38. So I want to spend the next little bit talking about exactly what that would mean to us. And this is a sort of dense slide, but it's a comparison between what Title 38 looks like and the hybrid Title 38 where we currently are. And then that third little column over here, I don't know if you can see this, is whether I consider that to be a net plus or a net minus. So the differences here, some of them are different, some are not. But in Title 38, for the hiring process, as I said before, it's just a CV and a license, whereas in the hybrid, we have to go through the qual standards, the KSAs, the veteran preference, and certs. So it's just easier. The thought is that if we move to Title 38, it would be a lot faster to onboard people because we wouldn't have to go through all these multiple steps. The probationary period for Title 38 is 2 years. The probationary period for the hybrid for us right now is 1 year, unless you're a GS 11 or 12. You have to have your license within 2 years. So those folks do have a 2-year probationary period. The pay is really the one that we focus on the most. For Title 38, physicians and dentists have base pay, market pay. The specialty pay, actually, I just verified today, that was taken out. That's now included in market pay. And then they have something called performance pay. Now, all of the different professions that have been moved into Title 38 have negotiated different pay packages. So there's no guarantee what hours would look like. So for nurses, for example, they have a locality pay system, which is more similar to what we have. So we have the general pay system plus locality pay. But for most of the professional staff who are in Title 38, there's something along the lines of a performance pay. And what performance pay is if you go above and beyond, if you're doing harder work, if you're participating in training, if you're doing grand rounds, if you're giving presentations in the community, if you're taking on additional duties, you can get paid more. As opposed to in the hybrid 38 where we are right now, our bosses have no way to give us a salary increase for doing extra work. The premium pay, what you'll see here is that right now psychologists are eligible for overtime and tour differentials. Nurses have the same sort of thing that we do right now. Physicians and dentists do not get overtime, but it is included in their performance pay. So again, if they work extra, they get paid extra. It's just not, their salaries are not as tied to hourly performance as ours are. So part 2 of this, the periodic step increases. Again, it differs by profession in Title 38, but for most there's an automatic within grade increase every 2 years. For us right now, there's within grade increases every year for the first couple of steps, and then it goes to every other year, and then it goes to every 3 years. And then again, once we get to step 10, we're done. There's no more step increases. Whereas in Title 38, it keeps going up. They don't top out the way that we do. Hours of duty would be about the same. So everybody's expected to work a 40-hour work week. Annual leave would almost certainly improve. Physicians and dentists now only have to take leave if they're gone for more than 4 hours in a day. The expectation is that as a professional, you're going to come in and do your work after, for example, your own doctor's appointment. And if you have to stay a little bit late, you'll stay a little bit late. If you come in a little bit late, it's not a big deal. Whereas for us, our leave is charged in 15-minute increments. So if you want to take an hour and a half off for a doctor's appointment, you have to put in for an hour and a half of leave. Our leave is based on years of service, where we get 4 hours a pay period in leave group 1, 6 in leave group 2, and it takes you 15 years to get to leave group 3. You'll see that physicians and dentists come in with 30 days of leave per year. When we're at 15 years, we get 26 days of leave per year, so we never get to that level. Nurses, PAs, and extended function dental assistants get 26 days per year walking in the door. So again, leave would almost certainly improve for us under Title 38. Performance reviews, they call them a little bit different, and they're on a different date perhaps, but everybody gets reviewed once a year, so that's kind of a wash there. The retirement, this is something that I just learned as I was reviewing the specifics of this again. In FERS, you know that our retirement is based on our high 3, but basic pay does not include overtime bonuses or that stuff. So even if you get a bonus, like your end of the year, if you get a superior performance bonus or a performance award, that does not count into your high 3. For physicians and dentists, if they have 15 years of credible service, they can use their special pay as basic pay in determining the high 3. So it's not just their basic pay. Those performance and other special pays can be added in to their high 3. And then the last one here on this chart is the one that trip people up. So the one that gets people excited is the salary and the leave. The one that gives people pause is the disciplinary actions. So in hybrid Title 38, we have MSPB, which is the Merit Systems Protection Board. We have protection for disciplinary action by the board when the VA is alleged to have committed some sort of prohibited personnel practice, and we'll talk more about that on the next page. In Title 38, they cannot appeal personnel actions to the MSPB. So that's a difference. Also, while Title 38 employees do have the right to union representation, they cannot have union representation for issues of professional conduct or competence, items of peer review, or their compensation packages. So the union is not allowed to get involved in those. The union can back them up on other things, but they cannot intervene in those. So I don't want to go too far into the MSPBs. There are people who are experts on this, and I am not one of them. So if you're concerned about the MSPB protections and you want to know more about that, you should talk to one of your union reps to get more information. But simply, the purpose of the MSPB is to protect us from unjustified disciplinary actions such as removal, suspension, or demotions. It comes into play when the agency is alleged to have committed a prohibited personnel practice. So everyone is protected by the Whistleblower Protection Act, USERRA, and the Veterans Employment Opportunities Act. But if there's some other prohibited personnel practice, like favoritism, or if for non-selection or nepotism, other sorts of things, if you feel like there was bias in reviewing your application, the MSPB, that's generally what the MSPB would weigh in on. And in Title 38, we do not have those protections. However, as I was looking into this, I found data from the MSPB, and interestingly, recent data show that MSPB decisions almost always go with the agency's initial decision. By almost always, I mean 98+% of the time. So on the slide here, it says there were 15,925 appeals to the MSPB. They actually reversed the agency's decision in 190 of those cases. So MSPB sounds like a great thing. It sounds like, wow, we really need that, and that's going to be really helpful. But when you look at the numbers, the number of people that the MSPB actually intervenes and helps is very, very small. The other thing that kind of gets in the way of this protection is that in 2017, I'm sure you heard of the VA Accountability Act, where apparently we are all terrible employees and deserve to be fired, and it was too hard to fire us, so they passed a new law where it's now easier to remove, demote, or suspend VA employees. Again, we still have grievance rights and whistleblower protections, but the VA Accountability Act does supersede collective bargaining agreements. So it has whittled away the union's protections of us. So, kind of our bottom line, by our, I mean my opinion and that of the AVAPL Executive Committee, the pluses of moving to Title 38 outweigh the minuses. So I had someone explain it to me this way, and I kind of liked it, that I'd rather throw in my lot with the physicians, dentists, and nurses and other doctoral level professionals than continue to be viewed and treated as a mid-level or auxiliary staff. I think that both personally and as a profession will benefit more from the simplified hiring practices and enhanced pay, leave, and retirement benefits than we would by retaining the right to have the union represent us in questions of professional conduct or competence, peer review, and compensation. So AVAPL is advocating for psychologists to be moved to Title 38 and for Congress to amend Section 7431 to allow for specific recruitment incentives and scaling of salary to reflect individual skills and talents. So under Title 38, remember, pay for each individual is based on a combination of market pay, base pay, and performance pay. If we were to move to Title 38 and have our pay authorities altered, we could reward those who work harder and produce better rather than simply rewarding time in grade. We believe this will greatly improve VA's recruitment and retention of highly skilled psychologists. So what happens next? I believe that we are closer than ever to getting the Title 38 authority, but it's not there yet. We are on our way to midwinter on Sunday, so we will continue to advocate next week and going forward for Title 38 and for updating the pay plan for psychologists. We recognize that this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. And even if Title 38 were to be approved next week, it will still likely take several years to fully implement it. It's not an easy change to go from one to the other. So there would have to be a plan put in place. It would probably sort of phase in over a number of years. So it's hard to say what it would look like even if it were to be approved. But we are hopeful that it will be. And AVAPL, APA, and Division 18 will continue to advocate on psychologists' behalf. So that is the end of the formal presentation. I wanted to leave plenty of time for us to talk because most people, when we talk about this, have a lot of questions, a lot of thoughts. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the mics if they're not already open, and see if anybody has any questions. Okay, so there, I see a question here. Yeah, I don't enter overtime either, Emily. We need to. So the 30 days of leave, is that sick leave and annual? I believe, I am almost certain, I will check, but I'm almost certain that that is 30 days of annual leave, and that sick leave is calculated separately. So there's another question. What can we do to help advocate for this as employees? I think that one of the most important things that we can do is talk about it in our psychology staff meetings, for people to understand why it is that we're advocating for this, what it would mean if we did, and to communicate either your support or lack of support to our colleagues in VA Central Office. So Stacy Pollock is currently our lead psychologist. I know that she's very interested in this question, and if and when Congress agrees to look into it for us, they're going to come to VA Central Office and ask their opinion of it. They're going to want to know, what does VA think about this? Do you want to do it? And I think it's vitally important for the people who are going to be speaking for us to be able to give good answers. So I think it would be very helpful to talk with your leadership and ask them to send the word on up to folks in Central Office. Any other questions or thoughts?
Mary Beth, can you hear me okay? Oh, this is Anthony
can.
Harold. Oh, thank you. I think I've been following for years. Well, in the process of the changing of a law, so I think we're like actually on a bill. Where are we in all those steps? Talk a little bit more about trying to get on a bill, or are we there and in discussion? Where are we at?
Yeah, so we've had every year during the midwinter meetings, we go up and we talk to the staffers in the House Veterans Affairs Committee and the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, and we have come with this same ask so many times that now when we go there, we give them our briefing sheet and we go, and of course we're interested in having psychologists move to Title 38. They literally looked at us last year and said, yeah, we got that, move on. We're just looking for a place to put it in a bill. So we know you want it, we're on board, we're going to make it happen, we're just not quite there yet. So that's what we hear year after year, is that there is support for it, and that they're literally just looking for the right bill to put the language in. My understanding is that it is in a recent bill that is just beginning to make its way through the process. I don't know what's going to happen with that bill. But I'm very excited by the prospect that it may actually make its way into discussion on the floor. So I think we're closer than we've ever been before. We'll find out more when we go up next week. We'll be meeting with them on Thursday, and we will certainly ask that question directly as to where are we at with getting the language into a bill. So it was written into the recent Tester-Moran Veteran Improvement Act, or whatever it was, Mental Health Improvement Act. But I don't know where that is. I don't know if that actually has made it to the floor. So there's a couple of questions in the chat. Psychologists in certain states who have committee members who could advance this. Absolutely, absolutely. You need to be very careful of any contact that you have with members of Congress or their staffers. that happen on your own time, on your own dime, on your own equipment. So you must not, under any circumstances, use your VA email, your VA computer, your VA phone, or even the fact that you are I think you're allowed to say where you work, but just be careful with it when you're calling to talk about specific legislation. But if you have folks who are on the House or Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, those would be the people who will be most likely to be able to move this bill forward for us, or any bill forward for us. So if you wanted to do that, absolutely, that would be very helpful to send letters or call and say that you're in support of moving psychologists to Title 38. Emily asked if psychologists are prohibited from striking. I have no idea. I really don't know. I think all VA employees, I think federal employees can't strike. I think the last time that happened was in the Reagan era when the air traffic controllers went on strike and he fired them all. So I think they're not. I think we're not allowed to strike, but I could be wrong. Yeah. So there's a comment about it being frustrating, and that is certainly what's driving this move. Is I've been with VA for 29 years. I recently moved into a position that allowed me to become a program manager, but I was literally stalled at a 1310 for 8 or 9 years. And I felt like I was working harder and doing more than I had at any other point in my career, and I was literally going backwards in my pay. So it definitely gets frustrating, and we think that the Title 38 is the best way to address that. I see a couple other questions. Are there many private employers who would match Title 38 benefits, leave pay for psychologists? I don't know. Like I said, I've been with VA my whole life. And so I'm not exactly sure. I did do an analysis a couple years ago looking at VA salary versus academic salaries in general, and they look like they're pretty similar, but then when you look at the amount of leave time that academicians have, their pay sort of per hour or per month goes way up because they're working generally either 9 or 10 months out of the year and they're getting paid all 12. And so they're getting a whole lot of leave time in there. Plus, at the senior professor level, they're making more than we do at the 1310. So at least in academics, there's certainly the opportunity to make more. Again, anecdotally, I have a friend who's leaving VA and moving to the Midwest to take a job that's going to pay her significantly higher than she would ever make in the VA. So there are private companies that pay better. I'm sure there are public and private that pay less. But again, overall, I think that it would be to our benefit. Let's see some of these other questions. I appreciate the questions coming in. If it were to be approved by Congress, what would be a realistic timeline for implementation? I don't know. My bet would be probably about 3 years, maybe 5. My hope is that it would be before I die. So I'm not really sure how long it would take. That's something that I could look into and see how long it took, for example, for the chiropractors once they moved from Title V into 38. I could see if I can find what that timeline was before they actually started being hired and paid as Title 38. But right now I don't know. I just have been told by many sources that it would be a multi-year implementation process. So Genevieve has posted up the address for your House and Senate members, so you can see whether any of them are from your location. So thank you for that. And then we've got, is data as to the reasons why psychologists left VA, and if so, would the move to Title 38 address these? That is an awesome question, and I don't have the answer to that. The all-employee survey might have some insights to offer us on that, but we don't really do an exit interview when people leave. So all we're really going to have is anecdotal data. So if I'm not real sure. That's a great question to bring maybe to the VA PLC conference and see if anybody has any insights into that, because that really is a good question. Yeah, so somebody says DoD contractors get a lot more money but no benefits. That's generally the rule with contractors, is that they get more money but not benefits. So thank you, Dr. Pank. The monitor says that women psychologists are paid less in general. Does that happen less in VA? No, it doesn't. We presented at the VA PLC conference a couple of years ago a poster looking at the numbers of psychologists in GS 13, GS 14, GS 15. And the number of women in GS 13, 14, and 15. And while there are many more women psychologists in VA than men, there are still many more men at the 14 and 15 levels than there are women, particularly at the 15. Women are catching up at the GS 14 level, but the 15 is still way out of balance from where it would be based just on the raw number of men and women psychologists working for VA. Liz, I don't know. Are exit interviews prohibited in some way or not typical practice? I know that when I've cleared station and gone on to a new place, they just give me that little form and I have to go down to linen and the canteen and everybody and get it signed and leave. I've never had a formal exit interview from my boss. I mean, I've had discussions with my boss, but not any kind of formal exit interview where I was asked to fill out a survey or give any sort of data. So, can you share your thoughts on the risks to VA if psychology does not move to Title 38? Yeah, so Tracy's never had an exit interview either. So if we don't move to Title 38, it's hard to say that there's risks to VA because we're already not Title 38. We can point to the number of psychologists that have left in the last 2 years. That it cost us 1,100 hires to get 300 employees, so that means we lost those 800. So to me, that sounds like we're losing people at a pretty rapid pace. We're still in the top 5 hard to hire professions, and there's a general recognition amongst VA leadership, congressional leadership, that psychologists bring a skill set to psychotherapy and to patient wellness that other professions don't have, that we have unique skills. So I think that we can say that that if we keep losing psychologists and it continues to be hard for us to hire psychologists, that veterans will not get the benefit that they would if we had more psychologists providing care. I don't know that that's going to harm VA, but I think it would be to VA's benefit to recruit and retain the best psychologists that we can. Okay, so of the 800 are left, wait a minute, let me scroll up a little bit. Of the 800 who left, are we certain they left VA versus switched to a different position? No, I don't know that. But we were supposed to get a net gain of 1,000 mental health people, and we had to hire that many people to do it. So yeah, they may have just moved. I don't know if Lisa Kearney's on the call. She would certainly be able to answer that question better than I can. So no, I don't know the answer to that one. Just checked 1 day of annual leave. Okay, thank you, Genevieve. So yeah, so this says 26 days of annual leave and 13 days of sick leave per year for a psychiatrist. I was under the impression that it was 30 and 13, but it may be 26. I know it's 26 for nurses. There you go. Okay, so it 26, 30, whatever, it's more than we get. Yeah, I mean, you'll get your 26 if you're here 15 years, so that's something to look forward to. Yeah, and so Krista says that they can bank a lot more. So we can carry over 240 hours, and it's in that table that I showed you. I believe that these slides are available for download in the corner here. Maximum accumulation for physicians and dentists is 120 days, and nurses, PAs, and extended function dentists, dental assistants can accumulate 685 hours per year. So they can carry over much more than we can. We can only carry over the 240 hours. Yep, you guys got it. Thank you. Tiffany, would you like to unmute yourself and talk about how to download things from the
So you'll
from the
notice
page?
that there's a Files pod, or a pod that's titled Files, and if you just left-click on the one called The Quest for Title 38, just left-click on it, it'll highlight blue, and then you can click on the button right below labeled Download Files, and then just click on that, and then a pop-up will come up, and then you can save it to your computer, wherever you save it, or open it up to view. Hope that helps. Let me know if you have any trouble with that.
Thank you. I see some folks still typing, so I'll give it a minute. Well, again, I want to thank everybody for coming. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I've been working on it for several years since it was handed off to me by my mentor, Mary Levinson, and have gotten lots of help along the way. And every time that I discuss it with a group of people, I learn more and feel like I understand it better and can make the ask to our congressional partners more clear. And so I do appreciate you all coming today. I appreciate all your questions, your participation. And if you'd like to continue the conversation, I'm here. Feel free to reach out to me on IM or by phone or email. As I said, the Executive Committee of AVAPL will be in DC all of next week. And this will be on our list of things to talk about when we go up to talk to the congressional staffers. And again, I'll be able to give you an update on what they have to say when we get back. So I definitely appreciate your input, appreciate your participation, and hope you have a great weekend.
And Dr.
Thank
Shea,
you.
I think a couple more questions are coming through, if we have time to answer them. And then I'll do a quick wrap-up, because I know some people are asking about some logistical things too. But it looks like Hillary had asked about if switching to Title 38 could have implications about expectations for psychologists to take call.
So it could. That's probably going to be facility by facility. Call is it's actually on one of those slides that I gave you that's part of the performance pay, I believe. And so people who do take call get paid for call. Sorry, it's in the slides somewhere. I'm not finding it right now. But yeah, that's generally a facility by facility expectation. It wouldn't be anywhere in the law that psychologists have to take call. That's Title 38 is a hiring authority and a pay authority. So it wouldn't be what are we expected to do clinically. But certainly some facilities already expect psychologists to take call. So I suspect that if we began to be seen more as part of the medical or professional staff, then those expectations may change in some facilities.
And there's another question from Krista about, do you know how nursing has achieved some elements that even MDs don't have, such as being able to bank a lot of leave, get 30 days, but getting OT, CT, and being able to take leave in hourly increments?
Yeah, so again, so Title 38 is just the hiring authority. Underneath the hiring authority, there's the pay authority. And so that's a subsection. So ours is like 7431 or something. And so each profession, as they moved to Title 38, had to get the pay authority for that profession rewritten. So, for example, if you go to the OPM website, you can pull up the pay scales for chiropractors. You can pull up the pay scales for MDs. You can pull up the pay scales for psychologists. OPM is who sets those rules. And so Congress says, yes, you can, OPM, you can set new rules that will allow psychologists to have, for example, performance pay. And that goes into the law, but then it's up to the agency to figure out exactly what that means and to set those levels, those pay levels. So, as nurses came into Title 38, they clearly did a better job of negotiating that with OPM. So it's not a legislative fix that determines how much leave they get. That's an in-house process that happens. So probably because they have a pretty strong union. The nursing union is pretty strong. Again, if you have any other questions, you can feel free to forward those to me. Yep.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Oh, Emily, I love that as a summary statement. So those of you who aren't looking at the chat, Emily just said the irony is that we can be such good advocates for our patients and clients, but such poor advocates for ourselves. And that is absolutely the truth. So thank you all for helping with the advocacy piece, because that's not something that comes easily to a lot of psychologists.
Well, and
Thanks
I want to
again.
thank you all for being here today, and a very special thank you to Dr. Shea and so much work you colleagues, AVAPL, especially has put into this. So I'll wrap up with some logistics before we end today. For those of you who are interested in receiving a continuing education credit for your participation in the webinar today, you can request this by completing the online evaluation. There's actually a link to it in the files pod, but I will go ahead and copy the SurveyMonkey address here in the chat box, so you can quickly do that right now. Just a quick note that members of Division 18 and members of AVAPL are able to receive continuing education credit for free. For people who are non-members, but you still would like to receive continuing education, you can do so by paying a $15 fee and still completing the online evaluation. I'll follow up with an email to everyone who registered for this webinar, so just to remind you of these instructions. And then also before we go, I want to give a quick plug for the third webinar in this advocacy series. So on June 17th, so it'll be a little while, but June 17th at 3 p.m. Eastern, we'll have another strong advocate and our current president of AVAPL, Dr. Tracy Smith, who will be informing us of national initiatives that impact VA psychologists and the veterans we serve. And so an advertisement for that webinar will be distributed as we get closer to that date. And for any other follow-up questions, feel free to contact me. Thanks again, everyone.